Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at the sun's opposition to Jupiter. So the sun is in the sign of Leo right now and is about to change into Virgo. But before it does so, it's going to oppose Jupiter, who is in the late degrees of Aquarius. So I'll point it out on the real-time clock as always, and then we're going to dive into an archetypal breakdown of this combination, as well as another I Ching meditation today. A really good one, another solid response from the I Ching when I approached it this morning asking for some wisdom about this transit. So lots of good stuff to get to today. I also want to remind you guys that although it's the middle of August, my next class is also coming up in November. I'm starting to advertise the course regularly starting in September, but for those of you who are interested in starting to get registered already, or even just starting to consider it, put it in your alchemical crockpot and consider whether or not you might want to start studying astrology this fall. So my first year courses always start every 6 months. And I'll be diving more into what my courses entail and what you can learn and hopefully what you might get out of my courses. Starting next month. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to bring up the real-time clock and let's take a look at this transit. So you can see that the transit is coming through over the next couple of days. Here's the sun about to move into 26 degrees of Leo. Jupiter's retrograde at about 27 degrees of Aquarius. And we're going to see that by tomorrow, the sun about this time tomorrow, August 17th today, August 18th tomorrow, the sun will be moving into that 27th degree. So you can see that it's going to be between now and Friday. On Friday, you can see the sun is at the 27th degree. By minutes, it's already passed over the opposition. So let's just say, broadly speaking, this is the 18th, 19th, and 20th of August that you're going to be able to feel this transit most notably. Now, yesterday, we also talked about Mercury and Mars conjunction. So don't forget that that conjunction is actually in the process of perfecting. So even though we're looking ahead to the sun and Jupiter, don't forget that Mercury is conjoined with Mars. Make sure you watch yesterday's video to learn more about that conjunction and what you might watch for, because the two are happening simultaneously. Really, both meditations this week, both archetypal combinations are things to keep in mind. So at any rate, we're going to talk about what it means that the sun, who is in the sign of the lion, Leo, in its own domicile, its own home temple is opposite to Jupiter, Zeus, in the temple of the water pourer, Aquarius. So that'll be our conversation for today. First of all, let's start off by talking about some of the archetypal combinations. As always, do a brief reminder of the sun. The sun is the planet that is related to the stirring up or conjuring up of images, fantasies, imaginal hopes, wishes, and desires within the heart, within the mind, that we end up acting and moving toward. Most of the time, we think about these like quests or journeys or missions. There's an aura of chosenness or destiny behind the kinds of actions that are stirred up on the part of the sun. The sun was talked about by Vettius Valens as a noetic light, a light that also it pours through in the form of imagination and desires that we pursue because there's something that we believe is going to fulfill us in some noble higher sense, an ideal. It's not just this is what I want for dinner. It's this is what I want from my lifetime, or this is what I want from this month or year of my life, or something like that. This is what I'm hoping to get out of this degree that I'm pursuing. So the sense of mission, greater purpose, transcendent calling that kind of lives in the heart and stirs us up for noble undertakings. This is the sun. The sun, also a noetic light, something that sheds light on truth. By virtue of going on these journeys, we come to understand something about ourselves, about the underlying motivations that we had for undertaking something in the first place, or about the nature of things. Experience teaches us. We have experiences based on these noble pursuits, and some less than noble pursuits. And we, the feedback that we get for having gone on these journeys illuminates us from within. So experience is the ultimate teacher in this regard. So we also have the sun related to our guiding beliefs, our guiding hopes, imaginal longings, and the insight and revelation or illumination that comes from within when we go and experience life. Now, put that next to Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet that is associated with the abundance of life, but more than, the bounty of crops or the abundance of the harvest or all the agricultural images that Zeus is associated with, which are very potent and can, deliver things like babies, fertility, wealth, success, anything that's kind of fertile in the material world that grows and blossoms into some form of abundance, or something that grows or expands. We often think of Jupiter like that. But actually, Jupiter Zeus is also the lawgiver, the bringer of law and order societally. And not all forms of law and order are good. There's lots of experiments that fail, but that begin with some noble idea of what the best form of government is, or what the best form of economy might be, or what the best religious or academic environment looks like. But anything that's meant to give social, moral, cosmic unity to things, the impulse toward those systems or paradigms of governance. This is related to Zeus, Jupiter. So when you bring the sun into an opposition with Jupiter, we are putting them into a relationship that is ruled by the planet Saturn. Oppositions, like the lights, sun and moon, are in Leo and Cancer, and we have those two signs opposed to the signs of Saturn, Capricorn and Aquarius. So we say that the opposition is of the nature of Jupiter, of Saturn. So when you're taking the sun and putting it into an opposition with Jupiter, it's really not so bad, because you're really talking about two planets that are, depending on certain conditions, mostly good. But here we do have Jupiter in Saturn's sign and co-present with Saturn in the natural opposite to the sun's sign of Leo. So we are getting a little bit more of the intensity of an opposition with these two, even though ancient astrologers often saw oppositions with benefics like Jupiter as ultimately positive. Still, a Sun-Jupiter opposition is going to bring out certain kinds of challenges, which our meditation today will focus on. But let's talk about some of the different ways that these two planets can combine, generally speaking, when they get into a hard aspect, say conjunction, square, opposition in general. One of the themes that you're going to see is just any kind of expansion or amplification, Jupiter words, with solar themes. So, for example, an expansion of things that are regal, proud, noble, generous, brave, heart-centered, anything where there's a theme of like enhanced leadership, or if you think about like the ceremonial music, proud graduates walking down the aisle to receive their diploma, the sort of pomp and circumstance, right? Also, of course, the inflation of solar themes can lead to things like entitlement or vanity or arrogance, or feeling puffed up or inflated in terms of our sense of, oh, my purpose is so noble, compared to someone else's or compared to everyone else's. Or we can feel like we're the only one who has authority or leadership or experience or something like that. You could notice that there are, authority figures, teachers, coaches, people that have some degree of authority is either being conferred upon them, or they're stepping into it in a bigger way, or maybe they're abusing that power on some level. For example, one thing that is in the news right now that is reflective of the sun opposite Jupiter would be regime changes. So anytime that the system of order, Jupiter, is pitted against the leadership or the leader, sun, then those two coming into kind of a Saturn-like polarizing can mean that there is a changeover in terms of leadership or positions of power or importance, or what kind of system is leading or governing things. So a change of regime, very much in line with the sun opposite Saturn, or excuse me, opposite Jupiter in Saturn's sign, no less. So challenges to leadership, also any of this could be applied to the father or father figures or CEOs, whether it's a man or a woman, doesn't really matter. So you think about the magnanimous father, but also Jupiter Sun oppositions throughout my 10 years, I've seen a number of times coincide with heart attacks, because you have almost like the image of the heart bursting, or, like the heart getting inflated, too big, too puffed up, physically, obviously, and sort of, dying. So the idea of regime changes, deaths of leaders, changeovers in leadership, with Sun and Leo too, oftentimes like celebrities that you will see die, because the Sun opposite Jupiter can also mean sort of the death of the king, or the death of an old order, or an old celebrity. I'm thinking of someone like, Clint Eastwood or something like that, where it's like, I don't know how old he is now. He's probably 90 something. Whereas like, he had his day in the sun, but now his rule is coming to an end. So you can see stuff like that sometimes. I mean, obviously you can see that kind of thing happening in Afghanistan right now. The funny thing is, I've been really committed to not watching the news this year. It's almost like a New Year's resolution for me after the intensity of the past few years of news stuff. But you always find out about the things you need to find out about. It's like, if it's big enough, you find out about it really quickly, even though I'm not necessarily going to the news. So at any rate, I found out about the sort of situation in Afghanistan, and I just thought, wasn't that so Sun Jupiter? Also, I mean, you could pontificate about a few other things like Saturn opposite or Saturn square Uranus. That's kind of, that fits pretty well. That also fits pretty well. But anyway, the Sun Jupiter with regime changes, the end of a solar figure. Don't be surprised when Jupiter is actually involved in death. One of the reasons for that is that whenever Jupiter gets into a hard aspect with another planet, it's as though an underlying order is changing, which can coincide with generational changes, and generational changes often coincide with death. Don't forget that Jupiter, Zeus, was part of a regime change himself. It's part of his nature mythically. He was part of toppling. He toppled his own father's order, who sort of toppled his father's order. So these are myths. The whole idea is that different forms of order have expiration dates just as much as, flowers or trees in nature have expiration dates. It's all a part of the natural cycle of things in this world. Now, Jupiter Sun can also be a legacy worth dying or living for, So if we're feeling hopeless, sometimes Sun Jupiter infuses within us a sense of there's something to live for here. There's some noble cause or mission. It can bring joy in our hearts, Sun Jupiter, literally, to just feel like we're radiating a sense of confidence or pride in who we are, what we're doing. But also it can imply paradigm shifts in terms of what's worth living for, the legacy that we're living in, or something like that. If you think about, it's a funny thing. I was hanging out with a friend not long ago. We were talking about different people who live like charmed lives. And my friend said, who lives a charmed life is Tom Brady. Not that we really know anything about what Tom Brady's life is actually like, or what kind of person he is, or anything like that. I really literally know like next to nothing about him. But I mean, in terms of someone who's just, it feels like they're born on third base, it's like that sense of like, you're the greatest of all time, and you're good looking and you're charming and you're, what I mean? Like all the great football player, obviously. So something also about the sense of being special or chosen, something like that. Zeus Sun can sometimes radiate with this almost like sense of the chosen special child, like Luke Skywalker or Princess Leia, both like children who have like special destinies. And so there's that. And then also, of course, there's people who are like, the amplification of my importance because of my wealth or prestige, or, so again, getting into that sense of like entitlement or arrogance. It can be a very self-righteous placement, but it can also be a placement that confers nobility and courage for good things. So interesting juxtaposition, right? Sun, Jupiter, and their opposition. I cast the I Ching this morning, so I want to get into that next. The I Ching, as always, gives such good advice, and offers such like, just focused insights. So I Ching's insight today, when I asked what, please offer some wisdom regarding the Sun Jupiter opposition, what kinds of things to watch for, to learn, to think about. And this actually led me, so I'm going to go through this, but I also want to, we're going to take a little digression or diverge slightly into reading a passage from a book by James Hillman called The Thought of the Heart and the Soul of the World. It's just a short passage that he has about the heart. That's really one of my favorites. I've read it before on this channel, probably a year ago now, or maybe even longer. Anyway, so the hexagram that I got back first was hexagram 52. Now, hexagram 52, it shows the top trigram is mountain and the bottom trigram is mountain. So it's mountain over mountain. And the name of this is sometimes called keeping still or stillness. And really the gist of it, in terms of, remember, the I Ching is mapping out different phases of life and different seasons of life, psychically, emotionally, mentally. So the little judgment goes like this: things cannot always stay in motion and therefore must be stopped. Therefore, again, hexagram 52 is granted. It signifies to stop. So stopping, that's really interesting. It's an interesting place to start with this because it feels like such an expansive transit. It's clearly a transit that would be associated with action and destiny and purpose and things that inspire within us a sense of confidence or even action. So why do we get this hexagram that's all about keeping still? In fact, this hexagram is the quintessential hexagram that's really about stillness, as in, say, sitting for meditation. So to stop or keep still, well, the changing line in a I Ching reading is often important. So in this one, line 4 came up, and I'm just pulling up some of my notes over here. So here's a few things that it says. First of all, line 4 talks about when you're keeping the body still progressively, as the lines go up in this hexagram, each part of the body is coming under control and is coming under rest and stillness. Then you get to the level of the heart. And here's what it says. The position above the waist is the torso. It's the most important part of the human body and self-cultivation, as it houses the heart. Stillness is deserved here. However, keeping still refers not only to the physical, but also the mental, where the heart is concerned, i.e., one's heart, thoughts, and yearnings must remain still. Keeping one's heart and yearnings still, as in meditation. Interestingly, for the Chinese, as ancient Chinese, as for people in Western mystical traditions, thoughts are said to originate in the heart. So the mind is not the seed of thoughts or rationality or choices or decisions or impulses to act in a certain way. It's the heart that is. And it's said that poor actions, poor understanding, poor choices, poor ways of framing the mind or relating to the mind start in the heart. And the physical organ of the heart is one part of it, but it's deeper, because the heart was said to be the place that houses the spirit soul, which is the actual origination of mind and thought and desire and intention and action. So the message of this particular line of keeping still is that thoughts originate in the heart, and that cultivating the heart takes practice. Namely, it takes coming to a place of stillness in the heart so that you can get to know the heart. And the heart is not a place that's rooted in thought. It's rooted in a combination of feeling, desire, imagination, hopes, inspiration. The mind is a reflection of the heart. That's the idea. And that if we want to change our mind and change the world or change the trajectory of our lives, that we have to cultivate the heart. And that cultivation of the heart begins by learning how to be still so that the heart can speak, so that the heart can come out. And that's it, a level below the mind. So isn't that beautiful? That's really beautiful for me, because when I sit down to meditate, one of the things, well, let me just tell you a little story. I always had trouble meditating as like a seated, pranayama type of meditation, just breath work. And no offense to people who are quite good at that. And I have there's one of my favorite meditation teachers, Eric Klein. If you ever want to look up a great meditation teacher, check out Eric Klein. And his wife as well. They work together. But I always had trouble with just seated sort of pranayama meditation, meaning just kind of, working with the breath, etc. I began with that, but then when I found Bhakti Yoga, mantra meditation came into my life, and there's lots of different forms that work for different people and different types. But mantra meditation is something that you're repeating mantra over and over, and all of a sudden you start, because you're pouring feeling. It's like also a little bit like singing. And you start dropping below, the thoughts are there and the distractions are there, just like any other form of meditation. And you start dropping deep into the heart, which is really the seed ground of the mind. And in that place, it's like you start to see some, just little glimpses of the spirit soul, the originating presence of mind. And that place, when we get to know it, when we cultivate self through heart, the control that we gain is not a control over mind. It's a different kind of control. It starts to extend through the whole body, and it starts to extend between the mind and body, so that there's more of a relationship between the two. This is what's meant by like mind-body connection. And what the I Ching goes on to say in this line is that how could fault or calamity come to one who learns to keep still and cultivates the heart, which is the originating place of thoughts and mind? What a beautiful teaching. Now we have to ask ourselves, well, why would that come up in relation to the sun opposite to Jupiter, right? Well, let's get back to that in a second. It goes on to say that this fourth line says, if we become too restless, we're always hoping to achieve more, striving for more, then we will become unstable for the journey ahead. Because when this line changes, it leads to hexagram 56, which is called to journey. Well, it's one of the meanings. Sometimes it's called the traveler, but it can also mean to journey. So destiny, if you think about the destiny path, people often describe it as like, I respect your journey. Have you ever heard that phrase before? I feel like I hear it every day. But someone's always saying like the journey that I'm on, or the journey that you're on, or whatever. Where does that sense of journey come from? That goes back to what we were talking about with the sun. The sun is it stirs up undertakings, Betty Fallon said. Like sun, spirit, daimon, all interrelated concepts that stirs up longings in the heart, seeding desires and images, fantasies, hopes, wishes, ideals that are somehow born in the heart, and it stirs them up for undertakings. And that's what we say a journey consists of. I'm pursuing my calling. I'm following the sense that I'm a special child. If you see the sun card in the tarot, it has a little kid on a horse, and if there's like light, and so it's very childlike and innocent and pure. There's this sense of I'm special. I'm called to something, and I'm following it. Okay. And so then we journey. Well, what this line is saying is that if we haven't taken time to cultivate the heart, then we probably don't understand why we're on the journey that we're on. Or we may be on a journey that's not about what we think it is. Or it could be that we're taking different kinds of journeys all over, in the micro and the macro, and the daily and in the big time frames, time periods in life, that are coming from a restless and unstable heart. And so non-action leads to self-cultivation, self being heart and soul, being itself. So it's a combination of self-understanding and spiritual or soulful instinct And when we cultivate that, then it extends through the mind, through the body. And the journeys that we go on in life are informed by the heart because we've taken the time to be still and consider what the heart is stirring us up to do. Most of the time, the reason that it can be so deceptive is not because, we're really vain, selfish, terrible people. It's not that at all. It's not like, oh, we'll get into the heart because otherwise everything you choose will be just fallen and stained and marred. No, it's that we're excited and excitable, but we don't have good systems in place in our world to teach us that not just any calling that pops up in the heart is the one to follow. I can't tell you how many times, in my own life and in my client's life, people feel like I've got to do something. This is what I've got to do. And and if I ask, what brought you to this decision? Oh, it's just an inner knowing. I've just got to go for it. I just know that I've got to do something. Oftentimes, what I'll help a person to do in, let's say, an astrological counseling session will be to say, maybe it is time to do something. Maybe you're sensing that the heart is longing for something. And that does mean that it's probably time to do something, to take a journey of some kind. But are you taking time every day to get still, to drop down past the mind and come into the heart? And listen, in yoga philosophy, the heart is the seed of the Paramatma. That's the little place of God that is with us in the heart, with the spirit soul. Sometimes it's described as two birds sitting on a branch together. And it describes the one bird, which would be our spirit soul, as like constantly looking around and doing all sorts of things, unaware of the fact that this other bird, the Paramatma, sits with it on the branch. And that the yogi is one who's cultivating the relationship with the indwelling spirit soul and asking it for guidance and including it in the conversation. So sometimes people will mistake the impulse to action for the actual action that's going to bring them on a journey that they can walk with some stability. Because again, what is the teaching of this line? If we become too restless, striving for something, but we haven't taken the time to cultivate the relationship with the heart, in concert with our strivings and our activities, then we'll be unstable for the journey ahead. Isn't that beautiful? In this case, the line also says that non-action leads to mastery. Now, some people may hear that and say, you're just talking about sitting still and becoming hard and then like masterful. It all can sort of sound a little too stoic-y black belt or something like that. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the idea that, especially when I've got to act, I've got to do something, when it comes up, and that impulse and that empowered feeling of like some noble, sunny thing is calling me onward, that we don't often take the time to stop, drop into the heart and deeply listen. And then the clarity comes. And then I know, okay, just some tweaks, some modifications that can make us stable for the journey ahead, that can just refine our discernment about what the journey ahead entails. So meditation begins with non-action, but interestingly, the non-action is there initially, or the practice of non-action getting us into the heart is not so that we stop acting or stop living or condemn something external in favor of something internal or some kind of splitting. No, it begins with a kind of non-action so that we can go into the action, the living, place of the soul, which is a moving, dynamic place, but it's in the heart. We have to cease a sort of physical action to get into it. And we get into that motion ground of the heart. And if we've taken the time to do that, then this line says that the mastery extends through the whole body and through the field around us. And then our meditation upon the heart, in the heart, that daily practice flows out into nature and all through our body and all through everything that we do. So that becomes a moving meditation. So interestingly, we also have to juxtapose some kind of daily meditation to get into the heart with, everyday life, which is always going to continue in motion. So it's hard because some people are like, well, you also don't want to get paralysis by analysis. You don't want to doubt yourself and be, trying to meditate every day to make sure that you're not taking the wrong steps or something. So non-action and action have to be close companions every day of our life for them to inform each other in a nice way. Interestingly, this line, by the way, has often come up for me in the past around heart attacks. Again, Jupiter Sun, heart attack, this one, heart attack, keeping still in the heart. Too much restlessness leads to calamity. It's as though, there's something almost karmically around ailments of the heart physically that have to do with not dropping in sort of spiritually. I actually have a family member who had some heart problems, and I pulled this hexagram and this line of this hexagram when they were talking to me about it and asking me for, just what I thought about it. And I drew this hexagram in this line. I thought I've always remembered that. So, sometimes an attack of the heart doesn't have to be literal, but heart ailments, there's a lot of different ways of thinking about what a heart ailment is physically, emotionally, stuff like that. But the main thing is that this line is saying, calamity comes when we don't cultivate the heart, and a kind of stability and an inner ground of heart-centeredness radiates through our lives when we do take the time to cultivate the heart. Isn't that beautiful? Think about it like this: when your nobility or your leadership or integrity is being questioned, or when you feel like you need to do something because you're tired of not feeling like you have a mission or a sense of calling or purpose, isn't it easy to make an overcompensating decision when that pressure starts mounting? Because it feels like our heart is dying. It feels like inside, like our heart is being, covered by something. I can't shine. I can't see the light. I need to do something. But if your integrity, nobility, leadership, purpose is being questioned by someone externally or internally, and you make an overcompensating decision really quickly because it's hard to get that, to feel like there's something there. It's the core of your being, your very heart and soul. It's being like tested or covered up or something like that. But if you make a decision based on impulse in those moments, it's likely to be an overcompensating decision. And that will lead to either inflation or future disappointment or something like that. So we have to make sure that the decision is more than just a compensating choice for some image, ego, or feeling of challenge or frustration that we're experiencing. So dropping into the heart every day. How do we do that? Also, the right choices in our lives come from right relationship with heart, which is the real source of our mind. Sometimes we go about trying to figure everything out in our minds. But when we make a choice from the heart, there's a kind of instinct that lives there. And we have ground to stand on when we make a decision, having gone into the chambers of our heart and listen to what the priests and priestesses in that little temple of the heart have to say to us, because it's peopled in there. It's a little community of wise men and women and sages and animals and stars, and there's all sorts of stuff in the ground of the soul. And it's always willing to give us advice, but it's almost like we have to become still enough to hear the whispers of the heart. And then whatever choice we make, it's as though we know we're being guided. And so come what may, we have something to stand on, the integrity of our heart. So I hope that this has been meaningful for you. I want to read you something about the heart that was written by James Hillman, The Thought of the Heart and the Soul of the World. Easily one of my favorite books he ever wrote, one of my favorite books of all time. He has a chapter in here called Cor de Leon, which is the heart of the lion. And he's talking about the heart. He's doing almost like an imaginal and depth psychology, breakdown of the heart and the ways that we think about and relate to the heart. It's physical, non-physical, etc. So here he's talking about the heart of the lion. The first of these hearts comes from folklore, astrology, symbolic medicine, physiognomy. The heart of the lion is like the sun, round and full and whole. The classical symbolisms of this heart are gold, king, redness, soul, sulfur, heat. It glows in the center of our being and radiates outward, magnanimous, paternal, encouraging. Ficino said that the nature of the heart is warm and dry, and that warmth has best conformity with the universe. The thought of the lion warms so to life. is so in conformity with the world that its thought is one with will, displaying itself in the world, enthroned as king, yellow as daylight, loud as a roar, fixed as dogma. This is the important part. Thought presents itself as volition, as mood, or as love, vitality, power, imagination, and does not recognize itself as thought because it is not reflexive ratiocination, abstracted away from life or introspective. Crucial to the heart of the lion is that it believes, and it believes that it does not think. So its thought appears in the world as project, desire, concern, mission, thinking and doing together. This is the bold thought that takes us into battle. For Mars rides a red lion, and the heroes David, Samson, Hercules must meet the ravenous hunger for the world of deeds fulminating in their expansive chests. So the first basic characteristic of the Coeur de Lion, the heart of the lion, is that its thought does not appear as thought because it emanates like the sun into the world and remains described in that conformity with its motion. Woo! That is so good. Oh my God. That is so good. Listen to this last part one more time. Crucial to the heart of the lion is that it believes, and it believes that it does not think. So in other words, here's the thing we have to be careful of, and here's the thing that's so beautiful about the heart. When the daimon stirs us up for callings, remember the daimon spirit related to the sun by Vettius Valens? It stirs us up for noble undertakings, for aspirations. We're not thinking about these things. They appear as calling. But this is the place from which the mind originates. The heart is the seat of the mind. So crucial to the heart of the lion is that it believes, and it believes that it does not think. This is just what I have to do. This is what I hear all the time from people all the time, especially when sun transits are coming up. I have to do something. This is what I have to do. So its thought appears in the world as project, desire, concern, mission, thinking and doing together. This is the bold thought that takes us into battle. For Mars rides a red lion, and the heroes David, Samson, Hercules must meet the ravenous hunger for the world of deeds fulminating in their expansive chests. So the first basic characteristic of the Coeur de Lion is that its thought does not appear as thought. We don't think of the heart as a place of thought. We think about it as the seed of our actual spirit soul, and yet it has a kind of thought. The soul has a kind of mind. The soul has a kind of a place of cognizing and thinking and feeling, but it's not the same as the mind. The mind isn't like an emanation of it. The mind is like a mirror reflecting it. So that's why it's so important, as this hexagram tells us, to take time to be still so that we can feel the distinction between the mind and the heart. So we can see, oh, this is this kind of mirror that's a reflection of the spirit soul that lives in the heart with the Paramatma. The first basic characteristic is that its thought does not appear as thought because it emanates like the sun into the world, and it remains disguised in that conformity with its motion. So how do we know if we're living on a journey that has some stable ground, that's in integrity? How do we know where our undertakings, the fantasies and longings of the soul, how do we know where they're coming from? How do we learn from them? We have to spend time with the heart every day to get to know it, because otherwise we don't think that the heart is thinking. And so we just follow it because it purposefully disguises itself in conformity with action. My longing is my action, and the two are not being reflected upon like thoughts. They're just springing forth from our being. Well, that doesn't mean that we still can't refine or get to know the thought of the heart. How do you do that? You have to take time to get to know the heart. You have to take time to listen to the heart. Most of us, so often we're in reaction mode, or we're in preemptive mode. And there's so much nobility that's coming from those callings that we feel to action, because they're coming from the heart. It's just that if we haven't gotten to know the heart, it'll disguise itself in our actions. And we'll always learn from the journeys that we go on. But along the way, we want to start to understand, what is this imaginal ground of being? What is this medium of soul? Who lives in there? Who am I? Where do these things come from? And when we get to know that level, the journeys don't stop. We're not trying to become more controlled or something like that, but we are trying to become more intelligent in the heart. We're trying to become more aware of the heart, and the heart isn't offended by sitting and getting to know it. It offers so much when we do, and it doesn't offer things in the way of mental reflections. It offers knowing, it offers illumination. This is why Vedic balance says that the sun is the noetic light. So I hope you guys enjoyed this today and got a lot out of it. If you ever want to read this book, it will just crack your heart open even wider. It's called The Thought of the Heart and the Soul of the World. And it's also about the connection between world, nature, embodied life, and heart, which is that kind of immortal, eternal, spiritual place. Beautiful book in case you want to read something really inspiring. So that's it for today. We will see you again tomorrow. I think tomorrow we're going to be doing misconceptions about the sign of Gemini, but we'll see. All right. See you guys tomorrow. Take it easy. Bye.